Okay, hi everyone, I'm Hilton Forrester. I've got my good friend here again, Keith Pearlman, with me. He's a specialist in litigation, and we're going to go through some stuff here which will definitely help people to do with tenants and properties and things like that. The art of these podcasts is to actually help people towards different things to do their business and how they're going to go forward, especially after COVID. So welcome, Keith, to the call.
Hi, Hilton. Thanks for having me back. Nice to be here.
Great. Okay, fantastic. But my first question to yourself, before we actually start, we just want to state that you've got a bit of a disclaimer. Do you want to explain what that is?
That means that um, this isn't legal advice. It's just my personal views on based on the experience that I've got and
Okay.
the sort of cases I deal with on a day-to-day level. It's not legal advice you can rely on. It's just me giving my personal views based on that experience.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, my first question to yourself is dilapidation, and
Oh,
we have
oh,
people talk about that. And could you explain what that is and what it means
yeah,
right
sure,
now?
sure, sure. Um, Dilapidations. It's really and I laugh because I'm seeing so much of these types of claims at the moment, and I'll explain why in a minute. Dilapidations really, in the legal sense, means disrepair. So, for example, when a tenant, a commercial tenant, takes a lease of a building, for example, the lease is likely to include a provision, an obligation on the tenant to put or keep those premises in good, we call good and substantial repair. What does that really mean? It means you got to keep it in good nick. That's
Yeah.
what it means. Now, so I'm giving you the legal, and then I'm giving you the sort of the colloquial, how what it actually means. But to, if you, I'm looking at you now, Hilton, in your very plush penthouse suite, and if you that was a commercial lease and you had a number of rooms there, on the day you took that plush commercial suite, you would have had an obligation, in general terms, unless there's a provision otherwise,
Yeah.
to keep it in good repair. So at the end of the lease, you've got to return it to the landlord in good repair. And repair isn't what you and I call repair as we're talking. It's defined. The way it's assessed is by getting a surveyor to go in there and define whether or not those premises have been repaired to the standard required by the lease. Now, all
Okay.
things being equal, forget any other sort of limitations one might put on it.
Yes.
Those obligations are incredibly onerous for a tenant, because what they should do is every year you should paint your property, make sure there's no cracks, make sure it's all done beautifully and properly, so that when you come to return it at the end of your 2, 5, 10, whatever period it is, it's perfect as the day you went in,
Okay.
or better. But those type of claims, for reasons I can explain, are often massive, and you can have it's an easier way for a landlord to make money, and it's a very difficult obligation on the part of the tenant if they don't comply with that covenant. And that's particularly relevant in the moment with regard to COVID, because of course landlords aren't receiving rent. So
Right.
it's an easier way. I won't say easy in relative terms. It's a way in which a landlord can make money if if the tenant doesn't perform the covenants properly. And there are ways I can explain how to minimize that risk for a tenant, and acting for a landlord, how to maximize your return.
Great. That's definitely a way to explain it. And I'm finding though for myself is that I've rented places before, and it's a challenge at the end of the lease or the actual rental with the landlord. What is the protection for, you could say, the tenants? Because a lot of the times the landlords can bully
Yeah,
you and things.
yeah. I think the protection for a tenant probably starts on day one. Actually, I think my whole ethos with I'm a property litigator. That's what I do. I litigate over property, and I think what I tend to see is that the market really is the determining factor. So, for example, what I mean by that is if you look at taking a lease today during COVID times,
yeah,
okay, when things are bad, the market's bad, a tenant, commercial tenant, can negotiate pretty strong terms for itself in a way it couldn't do when the market's very strong in a bull market. So in other
yeah,
words, pre-COVID, the market was rising, property prices were good, landlords could demand high rents and impose fairly onerous obligations.
yes,
In a COVID bear market, the tenant's in a stronger position because lots of empty properties, and that means the tenant's in a strong position to negotiate reduced rents, no guarantees, and more important thing, when it comes to things like repairs, they could negotiate an obligation where they don't have to carry out any, we call it an FRI, full repair and lease. They could have a limited repairing obligation just to keep it clean and tidy, or
yeah,
just to decorate.
yeah,
And the way you would do that is you could instruct a surveyor on day one to draw up, or between the landlord and tenant, to draw up a schedule saying, for example, that the tenant will not be obliged to put the premises into any better repair than when he takes it. And he refers to a schedule that you attach to the lease. Now that's, if you say, how do you protect yourself as a tenant? Depending on the market, it's all very well for me and my ivory tower saying what you should do.
yeah,
But actually the market, as I say, determines all. And I think that, in today's market, the tenant, I say, in a strong position, and you can negotiate far more positive terms by which to limit those repairing obligations.
yeah,
But let's assume that, as I'm seeing all the time at the moment, you've got tenants wanting to come out of properties. They've got this awful obligation on them to put or keep them in repair, or they want to break their lease. How do they do it? They think, okay, I can walk away, but or their lease is coming to an end, or they serve a break notice. The thing that they've got to watch for are these dilapidations. I often refer to this as the sting in the tail,
yes, yeah,
or a tenant.
yeah,
And that's because when you go into your property on day one, you can kind of forget about repairs because you're there every day, you're trading, you're doing all the things you're doing. And then all of a sudden you're coming to the end of your lease, and then you come to, if you get it right, and I'll come to timing in a minute, and you come to someone like myself, and we instruct a dilapidation surveyor, and I stress that, a dilapidation surveyor, not a general surveyor, to go in and tell you what your obligations are.
right,
You can minimize the claim that the landlord can make against you.
yeah,
There are other defenses, by the way, which I'll come to, but you can minimize the risk of a larger claim being made against you than would otherwise be the case if you don't do anything and you walk away, and the tenant and the landlord is then able to pursue a breach of covenant claim based on the fact you haven't done or complied with your repairing obligations under the lease. Now, if I haven't lost you now, because you've glazed over, Hamilton, you've glazed over all of it. So, so I'm trying not to get too technical
I've
here.
never heard of a dilapidation surveyor. I've heard of many different surveyors.
They're the ones that are hunched up, okay, as they walk along the street. They're very dilapidated and old. No, seriously, it's something that's very important because I do so many of these claims. You see, I say claims from what can be a very small claim to incredibly large claims that can be
Right.
pursued.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things I've always said as a litigator is, and I laugh at myself because people quote this back at me, is, don't spend money unless you're going to make or save money. Don't do it for any other reason.
Right.
And I think I have a very commercial approach to disputes, whether you're acting for a landlord or a tenant. But remember, in the commercial sector, again, I'm trying to put to one side, which is an easy COVID, because it's caused so many issues for commercial tenants
Yeah.
who are really, really suffering hugely at the moment.
Yeah.
But if you've got a PLC client whose financial position is good in relative terms, even though they're not making the sort of money that one would expect to make generally, but it's good, and they've got a good balance sheet, and they've got fairly good cash flow, irrespective of COVID. If I'm a commercial landlord, I'm going to pursue my tenant as best I can to ensure those property is put into repair. And if it's not, then I'm going to pursue with a damages claim at the end of the term. And there are ways to do that.
Right. I see. That's
So,
interesting. So when it comes to the tenants themselves, what are
Okay.
the I guess opportunities for them? I know from what you're saying is that it glazes over me and I know a bit about it, but when somebody's actually going to be renting a place, what are the things they have to be looking out for?
Well, let me, okay, two parts to that. If you're talking about in terms of dilapidations, and I say, and I'll just hark back to that for one moment, if I may, and then I'll talk about your wider question. I
Yeah.
think with the thing I would say to you, and I would say the advice I give to most landlords and tenants on that is plan early. Don't leave this issue to a month before your lease ends,
Okay.
because any opportunities you've got, and I use that word to kind of tie it in with the question you've raised, is that the earlier you plan, if you're a tenant, if you plan 6 to 9 months, I'd say 9 months before the end of your lease, and you consult, I say someone like myself who specializes in property litigation and or a dilapidation surveyor, and we work together very closely,
Yeah.
you will save a huge amount of money as a commercial tenant.
Right.
And then if you're a landlord and you plan early, you can ensure that you make or you put yourself in the best position to get the maximum return from your tenant. Moving on to your question about the opportunities at the moment, I suppose that's a much wider question,
Yeah.
because what we're doing really is we're going looking at the impact of COVID on a bear market. How does that affect property? How does that affect tenants and commercial tenants at the moment? I mean, look, the backdrop we discussed last time when we were speaking about all the difficulties
Yeah.
that COVID have created for landlords and for tenants, and the build-up of debt and all that sort of problem that's going to take a long time to resolve.
Yeah.
Then I talk about, the bear market that we're in at the moment, and putting a tenant in a stronger position. That's an opportunity. I mean, many tenants are coming out of buildings, or they're taking smaller premises, or they're going in thinking about going to serviced offices, or we've got this working from home scenario. Some businesses are now working completely electronically now, and or have an intention only to return to the office on a part-time basis. So what does that mean for office space?
Yeah.
People are going to be subletting what they've got because they're stuck with it if they can, and because the need for larger offices is going to be smaller, isn't it? Because
Yes.
if
Yes.
you're someone like myself who's an office worker, I'm going to be working from home probably 2 or 3 days a week
Yeah.
and going into the office 2 or 3 days a week. And I think that's going to have a massive impact. But I think it just means, I think ultimately, that I go back to it, commercial tenants are in a stronger position given the current market to negotiate far more favorable terms than they would otherwise do
Yeah.
in a bullish bull market. And I think that other examples, other than dilapidation, I think you've got, I say, in a bull market, you've got a situation where landlords could insist on heavy rent deposits,
Yeah.
personal guarantees, and all that sort of stuff. Where I think the ability, they'll still ask for it, but the ability to for a tenant to negotiate either taking premises without a guarantee or without having to provide deposits, they're in a strong position. Landlords don't want empty premises. Why? Because they're going to be exposed to business rates.
Yes. I agree.
And it's a huge obligation for them. So I think, it's all up for grabs at the moment. I mean, really, it really is.
It
I'm saying,
definitely is
it's all up for grabs. You can negotiate. Instead of rent is paid quarterly. Traditionally, you pay on the quarter days in December, March, June, and September.
Yeah.
And people at the moment are negotiating, monthly rents. They're renegotiating with their landlords with regard to existing leases, rent waivers, rent deferrals, reduced rent, no rent reviews, even though they have this archaic thing that says after 3 or 5 years on a review, it's going to be upward only. What does that mean? I mean, why
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
rent only go up? Nothing else only goes up. It should come down as well. But of course, the lease may not say that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of, we're in such a period of transition and flux at the moment where
Yeah.
things are moving and have moved so quickly.
it's a lot of uncertainty and
Oh,
changes as we go through
exactly.
this, and I think one of the key things, what you said, is that a lot of people now are working from home. Some of my circles of who I know, they're converting their houses to, they have an office space there, or doing an extension at the back or something to that degree. So it's changing the landscape, a lot of the things. So um, when it comes to going forward, though, eventually things will. Last time we spoke, I mentioned about having a crystal ball and trying to find out or predict what will take place. Is there any other things you want to add to that?
It's just it's the crystal ball is something I wish we all had. That'd probably put me out of business actually if I had a crystal ball. I think that I suppose you go back to those things that we were talking about last time. I mean, future trends and where was this is going to go. It's going to be the shorter leases,
Yeah.
the rents I've talked about. We're going to see changes with, I'm sure, with regard to business rates, which is a huge,
Yes. Yeah.
massive issue for commercial tenants. Um, and I think we're going to see changes in, planning laws and all that sort of stuff. I think you're going to see shopping centres and the like, they're going to be changing. I think you're going to see, I think they were having issues even pre-COVID, actually.
Yeah.
And I think of something like Brent Cross, which is probably the nearest shopping centre to me.
Yeah.
It's aging. And I think that even in things like Westfield, they had huge numbers of empty properties, even though you can't see them because they're very well disguised.
Yes.
So I think those beautiful shopping arenas are going to change. I think they're going to become more of a sort of an experience, leisure. There's going to be more, sort of, you may find gyms there, cinemas you started to see. You may find more residential
Yes.
buildings either as part of or next to. So all these changes and how that affects the high street as opposed to the city, West End, massive changes. And I keep saying it's the escalation of trends is probably one of the underlying themes of COVID, apart from all the tragedy and all the heartache and all the misery it's caused and it continues to cause. And we're not out of it
Yes.
yet by any means. I mean, you just have to look at the news. But the ramifications, even when we come out of it and the shops are starting to open and restaurants start to open again, great. But that doesn't mean that everything's now normal again. People have now become used to, even myself, I never thought I'd do this. I've become a shopper online. I never thought I could do that. And I even bought shoes the other day online, which is ridiculous when I don't even wear them these days. So massive trends, massive changes, and we are very, lawyers are very reactive, if you like. We're not very proactive. We're reactive to the market.
Yeah.
And the people that make money are the developers and everybody that sees the market before the market happens. But there are lots of changes. Changes can be good, changes can be positive, but I think it's going to require a degree of flexibility on all of us to adapt.
Absolutely.
Because those that don't adapt, I think, will suffer.
Yeah, you said the key thing there. It's about adaptation, and I think if you're looking in nature or animals, they the ones who adapt to this to the four seasons. They survive, But I think with us as humans, we tend to want to stick in our ways, or we hold on to things which really don't serve us anymore. And I think especially now where things are moving on. I mean, I had a guy who was working with me in construction. Now he's actually doing delivering parcels for Amazon, and he's earning more money doing that than construction.
I'm thinking of doing the same myself.
me too, actually.
I mean, frankly, I have so many parcels delivered here that they think I'm part of the organisation. So it's I'll get the uniform soon. So.
I can really see you driving around in a van, dropping things off. At least
Absolutely.
you don't need to
I would
think.
do it. I would do it. No, respect where it's due. Respect where it's due. But no, I think it's great in that people in the current climate are making, if they're adapting and having to adapt to make a living. I mean, it's you think of the amount of I've got used to walking down the high street and seeing shops close. I'm not even shocked anymore when I go. My local high street's Muswell Hill. I go around there most days in terms of just for a walk or a run or something, and all the shops are closed. I'm used to that. I'm not even. I think I'm going to be shocked when they're open again.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
bizarre.
it's going to be weird or different. I guess there'll be coffee shops around, that's for sure. But
Coffee shops for sure. Because, well, I think that's interesting because I think that if you think about that and you think about the local high street, and I bore people to death with this. I used to always talk about the death of the high street,
yeah,
and because I think local high streets were suffering immensely before COVID. And conversely, you may find that the high street, the local high streets, will regenerate as a consequence with people working at home.
yes,
So that more and more people will, instead of, you go out for a coffee, you'll go to Muzzle Hill for me, and I'll meet someone there on the days I'm working at home
yeah,
in a way that I would traditionally do in town where I work. So in the city. So that's those changes will come about, I'm sure. I think the big issue for me, and I think for everybody, is we are having to deal with this awful time, these awful issues going on. And the question really is it a permanent shift? Is it a permanent change, or is it a short-term trend or a long-term change? And I think that's where there's going to be it's going to take time before that settles down. People
yeah,
will insist after a while on workers coming back to the office. People will be more flexible depending on the type of office that you're working in, the culture of that office.
yes.
Yeah, ours is a very flexible office. It's great. It's, it works pretty well, and we've done pretty well considering we're working online. It's incredible.
Yeah,
But I'm one of the lucky ones. I work I work on computer every day. I don't have to go out and do construction work, which is,
yeah,
tough.
yeah.
Tough.
It can be tough. I think you're definitely right. I think the old climate has changed, and it's about adapting. And if you're actually working from home, last time I spoke to you, you said that you very much nearly paperless as well, which is amazing.
Paperless,
That's,
amazing.
that's amazing. Just
It
sending
is amazing
emails.
for me as well, let me tell you.
Yeah, so you can sign things online
Yeah.
now as well, which
Yeah.
is a doc sign. So everything is becoming different, and we need to just go with it, I think. And you said the key things, if you don't, you kind of get left behind, like the dinosaurs that die away or something, So it's
I think you have to. I think in any business, I don't mean just what I do and what you do. What everybody's going to have to adapt in some way to what's going on.
yeah,
And call it COVID or whatever. Ultimately, it's the market. If there's a market for what you do, you may succeed with luck and finance and everything else. But if you ignore the market and you just carry on regardless, that you become a Luddite. You're just there, not, you're going to be like King Canute trying to push back the tide. The change is there. You're going to have to adapt. And I'm talking as one that doesn't actually adapt particularly well to change, strange enough. I
yeah.
sound like I do, but it takes me a while too. So, but I just think we have to.
Okay, well, great. That's, I guess, my questions, Keith. Like for the listeners, Keith works at DMH Stallard, and he's a litigation specialist, solicitor. So I'll put these details online here, and if anyone wants to get in touch with him, he'll be happy to help you along. So thank you for your time today, Keith. And is there any last words you want to say before we end this?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me back. Always good to see you. I just wish everyone well. I know how hard it is at the moment for people, and with very few exceptions, we'll get through it. But it's tough times. So I wish you well.
Okay. Thanks very much, Keith. See you soon.